thank you, Krista, for this opportunity. Everyone, I'm Mike Turnlund. Notice the two U's, there's no A. That's one of my things. And I welcome emails. And so I've had some wonderful conversations with people because I do a monthly column on birds for the Bonner County Daily Bee, and people send me pictures all the time. And I will be talking about that. So we're going to go through, I have 200 slides. So we're going to go through them pretty quick. If you have a question, ask. I may not have an answer, but I will do my best. So before we start, I've been birding for 50 years. My grandfather on my mom's side got me into birding. And so it shows the influence of a grandparent. Grandpa taught me how to identify field marks, how to use binoculars, how to use a bird book. And northern Minnesota, that's where I was born, that's where he lived. And then my other grandparents in Minnesota, that's where I'm from, had a lake cabin. And we'd go there in the summer and I'd see more birds. And then my father, in his wisdom, in the middle of my childhood, decided to move to Oregon, which was great because Minnesota is a wonderful place to be from. I wouldn't want to stay there. And then I noticed as a young person the birds were different. And that just whetted my appetite, and I haven't looked back. So let's start with some common species. I will dwell on some of them. I'll go really fast through others. So if you have a question, ask. So let's start with the thrushes. This is a robin. Now it's a male, and we know it's a male because it has the bright, this is called the breast, this is called the belly, and so it's bright orange, but the males have a black hood or a black face or a black, some sort of blackness on the face. Sometimes it's just a mask, sometimes it's the entire head, sometimes it's a mantle that goes all the way over the shoulders. And so the males show up about 2 weeks before the females, and they get their territory. And now this is a passerin, and I want to talk really briefly about nesting. Birds flock, and so they can go around and look for resources as they need to. And all birds are specialists, right? So they don't compete against other species. That's why they exist. And of course, what are robins famous for? What do they eat?
Worms.
Worms. And they don't compete with no one. They can hunt worms. And so you see them on golf courses, you see them everywhere. But now all of a sudden this bird mates, pairs up with two adult birds, and now they're going to raise a family of 2, 3, 4, 5 nestlings. They can't just fly off and find more food. They have to establish a territory. So that's why the males get so aggressive. They're establishing a territory against other members of their species. There's not room enough for two. There's only room enough for that family unit. So that's why they get so aggressive and you see them chasing each other. And once they get that territory, that nesting territory, they need all the resources in that territory. The male defends it by singing. So he'll get up on a high perch. His coloration advertises who he is. His song advertises to all the other males, stay away. I will defend this territory. And they do that. So that's why male passerins sing. Not all passerins sing. Even grosbeaks, the males don't sing. They don't establish a territory. So that's very important. And then they're done. They all get back together as a flock, and then they go on their respective winners. Females tend to be less brightly colored. They don't need to be. They're covertly colored because they sit on the nest. Oftentimes, typically, the male will feed the female, so he's busy. He's feeding himself, he's feeding the female, and then he's guarding the territory. So they actually, males can have a high mortality rate, and they actually lose weight over the summer. So when the babies are finally fledged and they're on their own, they hurry up and bulk up again before they travel south. So that's the American robin. This is another thrush. This is the varied thrush. This one you'll hear more often than you'll see. When I lived in Southeast Alaska, this was the harbinger of spring, not the American robin. You'll hear these guys, and I'll do a lot of bird songs. They go, bzzz, 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 That's what they sound like. And you hear that, and it's not melodious at all. But the very thrush is a locally common. You'll find them where they like to be. And so as with a lot of species, you have to go to them because they're not going to come to you. Where you live is its own little ecosystem. And the birds that visit you can thrive there. Birds that cannot won't. So you have to go to them.
What kind of habitat do they like?
These?
Varied thrush.
They like marshier areas, and they like open conifers. So go out to Odin Bay, I see them there. So this is a Swainson's thrush. This is one of my favorites. This bird is famous for its song. You may never see one. It's a robin-like bird. When they do show up, they come up, they stop, and they got their beak in the air, and they're plump, and then they run off, and they stop again and look at you. The Swainson's has the song that winds up. It goes like this.
Want me to play it?
Sure.
If you want to. I mean, I have it right
Well,
here.
here, let me just go ahead. It goes, winds up.
Yep.
And then, so you'll hear that. Now there's two other thrushes. We have the hermit thrush, which has dark dots, and then we have the veery. The veery winds down. And they look very similar. So one's winding up, one's winding down. The hermit thrush, kind of in between. So that's another one. I have one of these in my front yard. Mountain bluebird. It's a thrush. You've seen them perhaps in the light. They don't look real. The males are stunning. Now on Dufert Road where I live, there's some pasture. And on the south side of Dufert, we have a pair of breeding mountain bluebirds. The female, by the way, looks very similar to the Townsend solitaire, which is another thrush. But on the north side, we have the other bluebird, the western bluebird. Not as common, but the male has red. And otherwise, they're quite similar. We are about as far north and as far east as you can get and still be in western bluebird territory. They go more south and towards the Pacific. Mountain bluebirds go all the way up to Alaska. So there is a little bit of overlap here. We have two bluebirds. That's kind of cool. This is the spotted towhee. Used to be called the rufous-sided towhee, and then they changed it. So I have one of these in my backyard. They skulk around in briars. You hear them. You won't oftentimes see them. And I actually have one going to a feeder that I set up for grosbeaks. But look at that red eye. They're just something when you see them. We're just outside of their year-round range. You might occasionally have one that stays. I don't see it. But if we went 100 miles west, we would be in their year-round range where they're residents. Song sparrow. This is one of my favorites. Now a song sparrow, they're a larger sparrow, and you'll notice the eye stripe they have above the eyebrow, the supercilium, and then the eye line, the line that goes to the eye. But what's notable about a song sparrow, besides their wonderful song, which you have to learn, is with the streaking on the breast, it'll form a little Morpheus dot. Okay, they all have it. And it's not really there, but it's there. So you look for that to know it's a song sparrow. These things are called field marks, so you look for field marks. Chipping sparrow. This used to be the most common sparrow in North America until the English house sparrow arrived. But they're very common. I have these in my backyard, and they've already fledged their babies. Their babies are visiting my feeders, and I'm looking at these birds and I go, what is that? The new fledglings are sometimes difficult to identify. But the chipping sparrow, notice no streaking, notice the rusty cap, and look at the dark eye ring. Now those are very important because we're going to look at a winter resident that looks almost identical, but it isn't that. So that's the chipping sparrow. And they just go around chipping, so they're not very melodious. That's the house sparrow, and God bless them, because tell you what, in a lot of cities, if you didn't have house sparrows, you wouldn't have birds. So They're very aggressive nesters. When I lived in Sandpoint, they were a problem. They breed earlier than native birds. They're an invasive species. There are ways to control them without having to kill them. So, like how to keep them from nesting in your bird boxes and that sort of thing. This is a white-crowned sparrow. Again, no streaking on the breast or belly, and you can't miss that head with the 3 white stripes and the 5 black stripes. And they're common, so they might show up at your feeder, but they do move around a bit. These birds will start coming back to your feeder in the fall, because right now they've found a place, they're settled down, they're nesting, and they're exploiting that little territory that they have. But once the baby's fledged, they'll start moving around again. This is a savanna sparrow. They look pretty nondescript, but you have to look for field marks. Notice the breast is streaked, but the belly isn't. And look it up at the lores. The lores is that region between the eyes and the beak, and so this is the supralower region. Notice the gold, that yellow. It's quite pretty. You'll see these guys in weedy areas or overgrown areas, like a horse pasture that hasn't had a horse for a couple of years, and so the grass is starting to get tall. I see these out at the University of Idaho at their research station over on Boyer, and you'll see a lot of savanna sparrows there. They're kind of cool. This is a junco, and there's 5 or 6 different subspecies or races depending on whom you reference, and they don't look the same, but they all have what I call a junco tail. So you have a black tail with white feathers on the outside, and they have the pink bill, and they have the dark eyes. So the larger family is called dark-eyed juncos. This is the Oregon race, and it's the most common subspecies or race in our area. These guys like to feed on the ground. So when I go by my bird feeder, I give it a shake, let stuff fall to the ground to feed the juncos. They prefer not to go on the bird feeders. They like to, and then in the winter they scratch, and they'll hop with both their feet and they'll scratch in the snow and looking for something to eat. There's the female, and she's notable because we have to look at her. Yes.
They live here year-round?
They are year-round residents, yes. This is the slate-colored junco. It's also another junco. It's another race of the dark-eyed junco. The slate-colored. And I see these more often in the winter. They come and visit my feeder, but they're around here year-round. We're just on the edge of their normal range. And there's the female. And if you notice, she looks very similar to that female. So there's some commonality there with the females. But they're juncos, pink bills, junco tails, and the dark eyes.
Pink bills, that's a common.
And that's the field mark of the juncos. The junco tail, which has the two, they're framed, dark tails framed by white feathers, and then they have the pink bill. Finches, one of my favorites. Look at that raspberry on top, okay? And notice there's no streaking. This is the Cassin's finch, and people confuse it for this one, the house finch. The house finch is a related species, but look at the streaking. Now in this case, the streaking is the field mark. Both the male and female, breast and belly, all the way down. And they're very slim, they're very svelte, they're very distinctive. The female is readily identified, separate from the male, just because of the proliferation of streaking. But the males are quite spectacular. And there's one visiting my feeder right now where he's almost has no red on his head except these 2 orange flaming eyebrows. But they're breeding, so I have a breeding pair in my backyard.
And the Cassin's finch isn't streaking, doesn't it?
No, and that's the field mark.
Huh.
And also what they call the raspberry on his head, and they do. You see it, it's like, it doesn't, sometimes it looks like it was just planted on there. When it's standing up, it's got a raspberry on his head. This is a crossbill. The females are greenish or yellow. You look at that beak and it looks deformed. It's not. The red crossbill, you usually see them way up high, they're noisy, They're always calling to each other, which is common with flocking birds, which means I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And they feed on pine cones. And I have watched, when I lived in Sandpoint, I had a spruce, a couple spruces, actually a grove of spruces in the backyard. And those tall green spruce cones, I watched just in one day a couple, 3 of these rip through those hard spruce cones like I was eating a corn on the cob. That weird little bill allows them to pop open cones and get the seeds out. And they flock in large numbers. I see them out on, if you want to go see them, go out Sunnyside Road and look up. Listen first and look up and you just see them swarming and then they're gone. They rove around crossbills. Pine siskin, streaky. It's a little finch. The beak is actually a field mark. It's just a perfect cone and it's sharp. These are little guys. And this is a male with the gold on the primaries. And they're related to, and this is a year-round resident, they're related to this guy, the American goldfinch, which is also a year-round resident. But you don't see him in this pretty plumage all year. He looks more like the females. When he's done with his breeding plumage, remember, males have a high mortality rate. They're standing out, look at me, and a Cooper's hawk does come by and grab one. So they want to ditch the breeding colors as soon as they can, and pretty soon we'll start seeing these guys going through a molt, and they'll look like the females. The females look very similar to the pine siskin, and they're related, of course. Vireos. I love vireos. Vireos are little raptors. They're these little tiny hawk-like birds that are songbirds. They're wonderful singers. They're mid-level, so they're always at eyeball level. And you go through some place where it's brushy, and you hear this song, this bird just singing, moving around, singing. It'll probably be a vireo. This is a red-eyed vireo. And a field mark for vireos is they don't have anything on them, except for maybe some striping on the face. They have long beaks, very narrow, with a hook on the end, because they prey on insects. And this is the red-eyed vireo, which is great because it's the only vireo with a red eye, so it's very handy. Another common vireo is this guy, the warbling vireo. Again, you'll hear the song and you track down who's singing. I'm going to go find out who's singing. They're not going to back off. You're not going to scare them away. Unless you're really close. They're brave. And they'll look at you. And anyhow, they have a wonderful song, and their field mark is almost a lack of field marks. So if you see this nondescript bird, and it's singing away, and it's got that vireo beak, it's probably a warbling vireo. Now, has anybody here heard of splishing? Yeah. Splishing is the funniest thing in the world. But you can call birds to you. You can call deer to you. I called in a western tanager just about 4 days ago because they're way up high. I wanted to see him, so I splished and he came down. Honestly, this is it. It's ridiculous, but it works. You go splish, splish, and you pop your lips. And my older son, who's a birder, he just really gets into it. And the birds come. They're curious. They're going, what is that sound? It's not threatening. They're curious. And all of a sudden you have all these birds come and look at you. You have about 1 minute to examine the birds with your binocs, and then they're going to leave. They're going to say, nothing here, folks, move on. And you can splish them in once. You won't splish them in twice. But you can go out and you see birds or birds flying away, splish it back. Just stand still, as loud as you can, and they'll come back. So you can splish these things in. Funniest thing. It works. Pacific wren, they like the dark forests. You sit down, they'll come check you out. They'll only go a few 100 yards, and then they stay in their little territory. Wonderful singers. It's amazing that these little guys can sing as loud as they do. So they'll come to you. And then there's also the house wren. and they're also, again, wonderful singers. They like hedgerows and whatnot, and they'll nest near homes, barns, and they're glorious singers. And this, again, this is a bird that you first hear the song, and then you go to it, saying, I want to go see what that is.
How do you tell the difference between Pacific and house wren?
They're actually different habitats. You won't find these in the dark, mature forests. In my mind, I associate Pacific wrens with rib balls. A tree falls in the woods, have a huge rib ball, or those tangled little knots of down trees and whatnot, and maybe some standing water someplace close.
Piles.
Yeah, that's where you'll find the Pacific wren.
There's some Pacific wrens on the Frisbee golf course, right? I always saw some.
I don't remember.
Because it gets dark and that kind
It
of.
might be. I can anticipate seeing house wrens there too. House wrens will
Because it
go
goes
up.
from open to closed. Open
Right, yeah. Whatever they, remember they're specialists, so they don't compete against other species. So whatever suits what they can exploit, they'll be there. That's why you have to go to birds. I remember first seeing this as a kid. It was blue, and it was a jay, but it wasn't a blue jay. This is a Steller's jay. Possessive S. And of course, if you have a suet feeder, they'll visit you. They do hawking sounds. The one in my backyard will try to scare all the birds away from the bird feeder by mimicking a hawk. It works. He'll try to scare me away by mimicking a hawk. But I have a suet feeder especially for these guys.
Terrible birds.
This one you might see more of. This is, I would call this an eastern blue jay. Properly it's just a blue jay. I did an article in the paper a few months back about the Steller's jay, and I mentioned, hey, blue jays are moving into the area. Down in Moscow, they look like they have a self-sustaining population. So I want to go down to the University of Idaho Arboretum. They're seeing lots of blue jays year-round there. In Pullman as well. And a fellow on East Stufort, just 5 miles from my house, sent me a picture. He says, I got 2 of them in my backyard. So that's why I give you my email address, so you can send me pictures. So you might see these. If you do, let me know. Send me a trip to Moscow.
Have you taken any of these pictures? Or?
No. I do have some pictures, but they're not quite this nice.
It's so hard to get those pictures.
It is. This is a gray jay, also called Canada jay, also called camp robber, also called a whiskey jack. And these guys, if you go out far enough, they'll come to you. They're very bold, very inquisitive. They'll eat your pancakes when you turn your back, when you're out camping. Then you can feed them out of your hands. Anybody ever fed a gray jay out of your hand? It's so fun. You put food in your hand, you just stand there, and they'll land on it, and they'll start eating it.
Wow.
And then they'll land on your picnic table and eat your pancakes. They're very aggressive.
Mike, how big are those guys? I mean,
They're about the same size as the Stellers without
Okay.
the crest. They're
Okay.
still a good sized bird.
okay.
Those are the ones in Crater Lake.
Yeah, they're all over the Pacific. They're normally up further. They like to be just off the beaten path. A black-billed magpie, just call them magpies because the yellow-billed just lives in the Sacramento Valley. Probably the most beautiful bird in my estimation in this region. When the sun shines on those guys, they're luminescent purples and greens and blues. And they have that glorious tail. And when they fly, it fans out. They're gorgeous, and that white is as white can be. They love carrion. They're versatile feeders. They come to my backyard, but they prefer open areas. They're very common here. Crows. Crows like people. And where there are people, there are crows. Crows have adjusted to human habitation. And my understanding is, the authorities that I've referenced, crows and ravens do not inhabit the same space. Not ever. So if this is crow territory, no ravens go there. If this is raven territory, no crows go there. So they exclude each other. That's my understanding. So we're all familiar with crows. Ravens are larger, and they also, the beak is a bit different, and they make different sounds. Ravens are smart. They think ravens might be as smart as the apes. It's fascinating. They now when they fly, size is very difficult to determine. They're quite a bit larger than crows, but when a crow flies, the tail looks like a fan. When ravens fly and the tail spread, it has more of a diamond shape. Icterids, western meadowlark. They kind of look like starlings when they fly. They like open areas, they like pastures, they like farmland. Go down to some of the surrounding counties. We have them here in Bonner County. They have a wonderful song. And in fact, there's an eastern meadowlark, which is identical to the western meadowlark, and they're told apart just by the song. So the females can tell the difference by song. But they have a melodious call, and my son lives down in Benoit County, and they're everywhere, and I just love it. I hate these birds. These are the brown-headed cowbird. They're the only birds I kill. And the reason being is they're parasitic nesters. And what that means is they lay their eggs in another bird's nest. The egg hatches before the other ones, and it kills the other eggs, or it kills the other nestlings. And the surrogate parents don't know what's going on, and they will feed the babies till they get big, and when they fledge, they join their mom and dad. Now where that came from is they were a Great Plains bird that followed the buffalo, right? And the buffalo move around, and so they're following the buffalo. What do you do when it's time to lay eggs? You drop it in somebody else's nest. They become a problem. They follow the settlers west in their cattle and horses. If you're out somewhere and you see some birds on a horse or a cow, it's one of these. And so you can understand where parasitic nesting was advantageous for birds that were following a migratory animal. Here, they have decimated other bird species. So I have a pellet gun with a scope on it that has brown-headed blackbird on it, so I kill them. I haven't seen any yet. So maybe they got the message. My house is not a good place.
How did it relate to the buffalo coming, following the buffalo? How did the nesting relate to that?
Well, the buffalo move around. So they ride the buffalo, they feed off the buffalo, they feed on the insects that were kicked up by the buffalo. That's the niche they exploited. Well, they have to follow the buffalo.
So
that's
they
their
can't
food.
stay on the
Right.
nest, so
they can't stay in
so
nest.
drop it off
Remember,
to somebody that's gonna take care of them.
nesting's difficult for birds. That's why they have to do a territory. But when your food source is mobile, you have to follow. So that's what they did. Well, when they came west and followed the settlers, they brought the parasitic nesting with them, though it's probably no longer required, but that's what they do. And they've really hurt a lot of bird species. So that's the only bird I actively hunt. Well, I'm going grouse hunting, but that's different. Yellow-headed blackbirds, you gotta go to reedy areas. These guys are cute. I remember once I was on a walk and I was going by an irrigation pond, and there was I don't know what they were doing, there's a circle of yellow-headed blackbird males, and they were going bop, bop, bop. They were like popping, these special things. It was hilarious. Like, what are you guys doing? Maybe it's like male drumming or something, I don't know. Red-winged blackbirds, the female is very streaky. They don't even look at all the same. They have an interesting breeding methodology. They're associated with cattails. Wherever you go, there's standing water cattails. You'll hear the male redwing singing. I had what's called a variant male show up at my bird feeder, one of my bird feeders this spring. I didn't know what he was. It was all exciting, and I found he was a variant male, meaning he's a first-year mature male who never got his stripes. So he's a loser. He can't even get breeding space. So he's out at my grosbeak nest. I'm about a mile from where he should be, half a mile. just trying to make a living. Wait until next year, maybe we'll get his stripes. But the way it works is, as common, the males show up first, and with the red-winged blackbirds, the male establish, they find the best breeding territory in the cattails, and they'll fight for it. And the dominant male gets the best one. And then the females come in, and they go where they want to go, and they inherit the male. So whoever's there becomes the father of their children. And one male might have 9 females, one might have 1.
Wow.
So it's an interesting breeding pattern. You see them everywhere. I love these birds. Brewer's blackbirds. The male, when he's in breeding color, dark black, yellow eye. And I like them because they march. They'll walk across your yard, they march. And they are always in small flocks. And you'll see them in town, you see them at the farms, you see them everywhere. They're one of my favorite birds. Brewer's blackbird. Bullock's oriole. This is where there's a couple birds I've been able to play citizen scientist with. And this is something that's an opportunity for you folks. I was walking along near Travers Park, and I looked up one fall and I saw socks hanging from the top of the cottonwoods. And I knew what they were. They're oriole nests. The orioles weave a nest that hangs down like a sock. It's quite large. And I thought, joy! So I went online, did my research. There was no evidence that Bullock's orioles nested in Bonner County. Well, they did. And so that next spring I went back and I look up and there's Bullock orioles everywhere. And you think, how can you miss these birds? They're big, they're noisy, and they're bright, but they disappear. It's really strange. And so I mapped everything out. I took all my pictures and I sent all my information to a contact I have with the Audubon Society in Coeur d'Alene, and they updated their maps. Yeah, we do have orioles here. So go along where there are stands of cottonwood, good long stands, and look for the orioles. And look for these socks hanging, and those are their nests.
They hang high, they're up high?
They're up very high. And in fact, if you have an idea where there might be some, wait till this fall when the leaves fall off the cottonwoods, and then look for their nests. I saw one that had blue baling rope in it, baling string. It was kind of cool. Black-capped chickadee, everybody knows that one. Interestingly, the most common one in my backyard is the chestnut-backed chickadee. It has to do with habitat, right? My backyard favors chestnut-back rather than the black-cap. You might see the mountain chickadees. Anybody seen one of these? They got a racing stripe. If you have a chickadee with a white racing stripe, it's a mountain chickadee.
We call those cheeseburgers.
Well, you know, that was this one. I was a teacher for many years, and when the kids out at Clark Fork asked me about birds, they knew I was a bird, and said, "What's the cheeseburger bird?" I said, "What?"
Yeah.
And they go, you know, it goes cheeseburger, cheeseburger. That's ruined me. I hear these chestnut-backed chickadees. I hear cheeseburger, cheeseburger.
That's what you hear. Somebody taught me that. I totally ruined it for me too. It's like I can't unhear that.
I can't unhear that.
So mountain and black-cap don't do the cheeseburger?
Not as much, but it's most of the chestnut.
Boy, am I gonna be listening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they the ones-
Cheeseburger. Yeah.
Which ones are the ones that just go beep, beep, beep?
That's this guy.
Okay.
This is a nuthatch.
Oh.
Nuthatches look like they have flat heads. They don't. They look like they have upside down beaks. They do. And they're one of the few birds that can go down a tree face first. This is the red-breasted nuthatch, and they go me, me, or someone once described it as a little brass horn. Me, and they love sunflowers. So have sunflowers at your house. Now they prefer coniferous forests. If you have a lot of deciduous forests, then you'll get the white-breasted. So they're complementary. These are a little bit bigger, but they're white-breasted. So there's the two different. There's also the pygmy nuthatch, which we have around here, but they like ponderosa stems.
Are they the only birds that'll hang upside down on branches?
They're not the only ones, but they're the ones that most actively will do that. Yeah, that's something that they can do. They can hang upside down just fine. And they come to my suet feeder and they're hanging upside down, pecking away. Brown creeper is the only bird besides woodpeckers that can sit on its tail. And so what they'll do is insects, spiders, they overwinter by hibernating, laying eggs, or being in a pupae stage or something, intermediate stage, or as adults, they'll hide in the nooks and crannies of bark, right? All winter. They just kind of sleep through the cold. These guys go around looking for victims. So they go around picking through the bark, and then they'll fly to the next tree and go back up. And then they fly to the next tree and they go back up. And they're very common. They have a pretty little song you can hear in the spring, the males do. This is an orange crown warbler, and you'll never, ever, ever, ever see the orange crown. There is the orange crown. I've never seen it. These guys are tough to see. But if there's a noisy warbler up there that's kind of a drabish green yellow and that won't sit still and is way up high, splish it in, scope it with your binocs, and it'll be an orange crown. They do splish in. They're one shot. What?
I can hardly wait to go home and try it.
I know, me too.
It works. Don't worry, the birds will quickly get dulled to it, but it does work. This is the yellow warbler. Beautiful song, very active. They love cottonwoods. And when you see these things in your binoculars, you wonder how they can survive. Bright yellow, gorgeous streaking on their breasts. But then they disappear when you pull your binoculars away. It's just amazing. Noisy, noisy. You hear them before you see them. A lot of people, when they record an eBird, they'll say, yellow warbler, heard, not seen. This is a yellow rump warbler. This back part above where the tail, on the back of the body is called the rump. And there's two varieties. There's the East Coast, which is the myrtle warbler, and the West Coast, which is the Audubon. So this is an Audubon warbler. The myrtles doesn't have the yellow chin. And you do see these. I have them in my backyard. Beautiful. Steely gray, beautiful. Northern water thrush. Standing water, a small pond, a grassy bank, a muddy bank, no weeds. You'll see these guys. And they're so funny because they walk around bop, 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 bop. Yes.
You just call it a thrush.
It
Like
is.
a warbler.
It's related to the warblers. You're right. It's called the northern water thrush, but it's a warbler. But it thinks it's a western sandpiper. Because if you ever seen sandpipers, I don't know what they're doing, but they got this boogie tunes always going in their head, and they're always just rocking it. But they also do that. Bop their rear end. It's the strangest thing. All the time. That's a field mark. McGivery's warbler. They have a song kind of similar to a yellow warbler. You hear the yellow warbler song, go, that's not right. And so like a lot of warblers, you track down who's making the song, who's making the sound. And you'll see the field mark on these guys, besides that gloriously charcoal colored cape, is that incomplete eye ring. See the incomplete eye ring? That's McGivery's, okay? If it has a complete eye ring and a yellow chin, then it's a Nashville. It's also common, Nashville warbler. Again, it has that warbler song, sounds kind of like yellow warbler, it's not quite right. You track down the song. Who's doing that? And you can splish these in. Nashville warbler. They do have a little rusty crown. I've never seen it, but it's in the pictures. Yellowthroat. They should have called this thing the bandit bird, but it's the yellowthroat. Has anybody seen the yellowthroat? Very common. You have to go to them. Go to like Gamlin Lake, or they have a nature path at Gamlin Lake that goes out. The water weeds that aren't cattails, more like bulrushes or something, you'll find these guys zipping all over the place. If you go to where they are, there's lots of them. Yellowthroat, common yellowthroat. I love this guy. You can't normally attract warblers to your house because they're insectivores. So unless you've got some way of generating ants or bugs or something, they're not going to come to your house. This guy just shows up, and what's remarkable about him is that eye. You see this little yellow bird show up, and there's this big black eye. In fact, you notice the eye before you notice the black cap. Cute, 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 cute. That's a Wilson warbler. I love these guys. They're stealthy. American redstart. And the female. These are funny birds. Now, they're mid-level, second growth deciduous forests. Aspens, alders, cottonwoods. You go out to on Lakeshore Drive, the old fish hatchery, go across the street, there's a nature's walk, go to the east side and go off the path and look up, and you'll see these guys. They're really funny, and the way they feed is they have these bright patches of orange or yellow on the tail and the wings, and they actually go along and they go, ha! They flash their tail and their wings, and they wait to scare something. So a bug will flinch, and then they grab it. So they go around going, boom! Boom! Ha! Ha! You watch them, it's like God has a sense of humor. Ha! And you'll see these guys doing that. And they sing, the male has a wonderful little song, and they move all over, but they're always just stopping, they flash. They flash. That's hilarious. American redstarts. Yeah, redstarts. I didn't know how to categorize these guys. Cedar waxwing, notice the yellow belly. They're named for these waxy-like tips on their wings. They're frugivores. They don't even start nesting, I think, until July because they're waiting for the fruit to feed their babies. They do go hawking for insects, like over rivers. In the summer, they'll get a lot of insects, but they love fruit. Now, go ahead.
It looks like a jungle bird. Like something
Yeah,
you see in
yeah.
South America.
They don't have a call. They have a call. They don't have a song. They're a flocking bird, and they'll eat all your cherries. Notice the yellow belly, because if it doesn't have a yellow belly, it's a Bohemian waxwing. They're year-round residents, but they're very migratory. They go all over looking for fruit. They would come into Sandpoint. There was a stand of mountain ash where I lived. In January, they'd be raiding it and eating the frozen fruit. Ever heard a cat? You're launching your boat at the boat launch and you hear a cat, meow, meow. It's a catbird. They do, they sound just like a cat. You see them at, near water in that tangled bush that you cannot enter. And you hear a cat, meow. It's a catbird.
Wow.
They do have a wonderful song. It's a super fast, complex, gibberishy song. It's actually quite melodious, but and once you learn that, you can find it. They will splish in, and if you stand still and you're patient, they might come to you and check you out. But they're beautiful. They got a beautiful black cap, and the underside of their tail called the chrysalis. It's a rusty red. They're beautiful birds, and they're common. But you gotta. Whenever I go fishing, I almost always encounter a catbird, another catbird. Evening grosbeak, you can't mistake them for anything else. I have a feeder for grosbeaks, and they come visit it all the time. They're small flocks. They don't have a song. They don't require it, but they do have a distinctive chirp that they use as a call, a flocking call. Pine grosbeaks, they live around here, beautiful. I always see them in fours, 2 males and 2 females. I don't know. But they're pudgy. I didn't know you could get fat on pine seeds, but you can. And they are kind of real pudgy. They don't really show it here, but they're cute birds. And the male is quite pretty. He can be very pinkish as well.
You mentioned bird feeder for evening grosbeaks. What's unique about, what do you do different?
Here's an evening grosbeak. What I do is about 8 feet up, I have a trick to fill it. I have an open platform that I put a little sloping roof of cedar shakes over to keep the snow out in the rain. And I just dump sunflower seeds up there. My wife had the great idea of adding mealyworms, those dried mealyworms. So I started adding mealyworms. I attract robins to my theater. You don't attract robins to feeders. So that has helped as well. But so I get the evening grosbeak as well. And all the grosbeaks will come and eat there. They like it open. These guys will also go to my theater, but they prefer that big open one. Lazuli bunting. This is a bird I chased all over the county for years. And then one afternoon I looked up in my backyard and there was one. So they're beautiful little birds. They look like miniature western bluebirds. Lazuli buntings. Buntings are, what constitutes a bunting is generally bright uniform colors without streaking. And that meets it right there. Beautiful birds. Starling, European starling, they're named for the little stars when they're breeding season. They tend to be in the same niche as brewer's blackbirds, so they sometimes will flock, not so much flock together, but they'll be side by side. Two flocks and starlings. Western tanager. This is a bird you can't forget. Here's the female. They're up high. They sing from way up high. The males you can't forget. They splish in. I just called one in the other day when I was out on one of my walks. I heard them up there singing. They have a chirrup, 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 kind of like a robin, but just chirrup, chirrup, chirrup. And I knew what it was, so I just splished, and he came down, looked at me, and then he went away. Downy woodpecker is the smallest woodpecker. I have a suet feeder. If there's a woodpecker at my suet feeder and I can't see it, it's a downy. They're small. They're named for that little tuft, I suppose, on their nose. And they're almost identical to the larger hairy. Now the hairy woodpecker has a strange name. Evidently these feathers on its back are very hair-like, and it's named for that. But they look identical to a downy, and people confuse them. They're actually quite a bit bigger. So if I'm at the suet feeder and there's a woodpecker and I can see the tail on the top of the head, I know it's a hairy. The downy's too small. But the beak is almost the same length as the head, whereas in a downy, the beak's shorter. They exploit different niches. Northern flicker, specifically the red-shafted flicker. On the East Coast, they have the yellow-shafted flicker, the shafts of the feathers. They eat ants. I've seen them burrow in a cottonwood, a male and female, and they punched out a nest in minutes. I kid you not. Wood was flying. Amazing. But they feed on the ground. I once watched 3 different ones, one of those big anthills that we get around here, covered with snow in January. 3 of them were attacking it all at once, drilling in there and eating all the babies. Heartless. But they like, that's a male because he has the red mustache.
They like to put holes in wooden buildings too.
They will, and they can be noisy. Yes, they can be. Pileated woodpecker, big, crow-sized, can't miss them. People think they attack their trees and kill them. They don't. Your tree is dying. If you have pileated woodpeckers, your tree is infested with carpenter ants. They know it, they're getting them out. So, male and female, they're crow-sized. The male has a red mustache, the female has a black one. Yes?
Was it the pileated that had that? Oh.
That duel going on?
Yeah.
No, it was these guys.
Oh.
Red-naped sapsucker. These are not a summer resident. They're only a summer resident. Sapsuckers are woodpeckers. And I had 2 males. They don't have songs, so they drum. And they have a very specific drum. I had 2 males trying to outdrum each other about a month ago. And finally one found the aluminum roof, and he won the tin roof. But sapsuckers are called that because they cut these wells. They're called wells. You've seen these on deciduous trees, fruit trees? And they just cut through to the xylem level, and then when the sap runs, they fill with sap, and then they lick the sap. And hummingbirds, rufous hummingbirds, show up before there's flowers. How can they do that? Because they're feeding off the wells of the sapsuckers. So other birds, orioles will go to these, insects go to these, so sapsuckers go and they lick up the sap and then they eat the bugs. Hummingbirds eat bugs, and they'll also go there and eat. Yeah, people think hummingbirds live only on nectar. No, 30% of their diet is bugs. You can't build bones and muscle on sugar water. Raptors. The subspecies we have, the western turkey vulture, winters in South America. He flies a long ways. One of my favorite birds. I just love to see him. To me, that's spring. When they show up.
What do you call a group of them? Because we have, out on East Side Road, we have an area that I would refer to probably as like a rookery.
Yeah.
Almost
You know,
and they've got ravens and those
yeah.
guys.
I don't
Huge.
know. I say you got a lot of deer kill out there then.
A bunch.
Yeah. I don't know. That's British English. They use singular nouns for groups, and I don't know. I stick with flocks and herds, and that's it. This is a northern harrier, and harriers do something called kiting, which means when the wind's blowing, they stand there in the wind, and they just kind of like a kite, and they go pretty close over the ground. Notice the yellow rump. The white rump. Harriers have an owl-like face, but the male and female do not at all look the same, but they have that white rump. And you'll see them over open areas, especially on a breezy day, and they're just soaring in the controlled soar over the ground. And they're really cool. But like a lot of raptors, there's never a lot of raptors because they're apex predators. They're on the top of the food chain. So it's like the gazelles versus the lions on the Kalahari. There's only so many lions. American kestrel used to be called the sparrowhawk. It's not a hawk, it's a falcon. So American kestrel.
Wow.
The male is considered the prettiest raptor in the world. The female looks a lot like a merlin, so you got to get to differentiate between merlins and kestrels. And also with raptors, females are bigger. They can be twice as big as a male, and there's reasons for that. Because when they have a territory, they don't compete against each other. Otherwise, they'd compete. And as apex predators, there's only so much prey. So one of the adaptions is for the female to be twice as big as the male. This is a sharp-shinned hawk, about the size of a dove. When you have a hawk come ripping into your backyard, attacking your birds at the bird feeder, it's this guy. They are crazy. They're kamikaze. They come crashing in, and you think they're wounded, and they flap. They go after a chickadee or something. The bigger version is the Cooper's hawk, about the size of a crow. Also called the chicken hawk. They are chicken hawks. My wife watched one steal one of our chickens last year. So I had to put up a canopy over the run for the birds to hide under when the Cooper's hawks go over. This one you won't see often. It's a Swainson's hawk. The reason I put it up is there are other large hawks around here. And people think, oh, it's a red tail. It's not. There's ferruginous and there's the Swainsons. The big one though is, they're all about the same size, but the most common is the red-tailed. But remember, they don't get the red tail till their second year. So you see a lot of immature red tails and think, what is that? Is that a ferruginous? No, what is that? So you got to get to know the immature phases of your raptors.
What's ferruginous?
What's a ferruginous?
Yeah.
It's another hawk that comes through here. It's not as common. It's more common east of us, and the Swainsons, this isn't ideal habitat for either, but they do come through here. So you have to be aware of that. This is a golden eagle. People tell me they see these all the time on Longbridge. They're not. This is not great habitat for golden eagles. They like wide open areas, like the plains. They do come through. I've seen them. I almost exclusively see them on deer kill. And they're physically built different than eagles, than bald eagles. Bald eagles are like a big hawk. These guys are more like a machine. They're big, broad shoulders, and
Is that a male?
that's a male, yeah.
And also along Hope, when we were around the Hope, is that what we thought we were putting those out
Right,
for?
yeah, on Hope, especially in the winter, you'll see them on deer kill. And the ravens will be around waiting for this big eagle to finish eating, and then they go in.
So what they see on Long Bridge are immature bald eagles.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's a bald eagle, which we're familiar with, but they go through, it's not till their 4th year do they get their mature plumage. This is a 2nd year immature. They're still adult size. They're on their own. They're completely self-sufficient, but they have to wait till they're 4 years old before they become breeding. So this is a 2nd year because it's got the white cap. A 1st year doesn't have the whitish cap, a 2nd year has a white cap, and a 3rd year has a white cap and a white cheek. And then the next year, they have a completely white head. So there's a lot of immature bald eagles, and people are wondering, oh, I sure see a lot of golden eagles. No, you're not. Also, they're very much specialists. My understanding is either bald eagles hunt ducks, or they fish. They don't do both. So we probably have 2 distinct populations of bald eagles where we are. The ones on Long Bridge are duck hunters. I watched them grab coots and grebes. The ones over the other part of the lake by Hope and stuff are fishers. So either they hunt ducks or they hunt fish. They don't do
won't eat
both.
chickens.
I don't know. I've never heard of an eagle predating chickens.
I had an eagle, like from here to there, sitting on a limb. The chickens are scared to death underneath.
Sure, they should
And
be.
this was the neatest looking eagle I'd ever seen, and he was just watching.
He might be. Eagles, I mean, why would eagles take carrion? They're hungry. It's usually in the winter. I don't know. But yeah, I'm sure if they were the birders and they saw a chicken, they would probably have visions of chicken meal in it.
Well, I'd never been that close to an
Yeah,
eagle.
yeah.
I mean, it was
My wife and I,
huge.
we caught a juvenile, a 1-year-old juvenile, last year, came marching through our garden. I thought, am I?
It actually came to us.
It came to us. And it was a 1st year because it had a completely brown head. And we took it to the eagle people.
It was hurt, but you didn't just catch it for fun.
No, it had a
No.
wound.
Yeah, it was hurting.
Yeah. And ospreys. Ospreys, of course, are not your own residents.
So quick question on the fishing bald eagles. Do they fish like ospreys?
No. Osprey plunge in.
Right, yeah.
Eagles, and this is the way it was in Alaska too, very elegantly, they just swing down, they just grab it and go on.
But they pluck them right
They
out.
pluck them right out. I don't know how they do it. They circle around, they circle around, they circle around, they come down, and they just grab it and go.
Well, the worst part is you're out there fishing for an hour catching these perch and then it pulls out this.
Yeah. They will also, osprey are bald eagles will always harass an osprey. Osprey catches a
Crazy.
fish, and I watch this again and again and again. The osprey, the bald eagle will harass it, but it drops it, and the bald eagle
Races
swoops
on.
down and grabs it. They piratize it. Short-eared owl. Owls are tough to see because they're nighttime, most of them. This one you will see in the evening. I see this one alongside the road catching rodents. They're beautiful. A short-eared owl. I've never seen the ears.
Grandpa,
Mm-hmm.
why do owls have so much big wings?
That's a good question. So when they catch stuff, they can carry it. They're also absolutely quiet. Have you ever heard an owl fly by? There's no sound. They're remarkable. Yes.
We found a saw-whet down at Garden Street.
Did you? A dead saw-whet? Yeah, we'll look at saw-whets. So this is a short ear. They're a medium-sized owl. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful birds. Great horned, our heaviest owl. You normally see their silhouette. They have big horns. I was at Travers Park in the evening with our Cocker Spaniel, and on the baseball backstop there was a great horned owl looking at my Cocker Spaniel. So I had to walk over by the Cocker Spaniel to protect her from the great horned owl. He would have, or she or he, it would have swooped down and just killed him instantly. Broke its neck and had dog dinner. Great horned owl is the largest, but not the heaviest. They're actually lightweights, a lot of fluff. Beautiful. You'll see them top of a tree, see the silhouette, singing. Beautiful birds. Big. Barred owl, also called a hoot owl. These are fun birds. I'll see these when I'm out deer hunting. And they'll just look at you. They'll just watch you and they'll look at you. And they caterwaul. You ever heard the caterwauling? Whoa, 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 whoa. At night, it's crazy. During deer season, like, oh, it's spooky. And they're loud. And that's a hoot owl. And they're related to the spotted owl. And the spotted owl is actually being invaded in the Cascades of Washington by barred owls, and they're eating them. So they're eating their cousins.
Is that the one you talked about that goes, who?
Yeah. Who cooks? Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?
Oh,
Ah,
That's their call. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? Yeah, thank you. That's the hoot owl. Sawettes, little tiny. There's one at the Sandpoint Library, a stuffed one. They're about the size of my fist. You'll hear them. They have the most monotonous song you've ever heard at night. Boop, 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 boop. It never stops. Close the window, turn on the fan. Boop, boop. Sawettes. You need to know my song. Screech owls do not screech. The western screech owl. They have what's called a bouncing ball song. So you take a ping pong ball and drop it. It goes bounce, bounce, bar, right? Boop, 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 boop. The bouncing ball song. That's a western screech owl. These guys are terrorists. This is a northern pygmy owl. They're a diurnal owl. They're out during the day. And they have a song like the saw-whet. It goes boop, boop. They just boop. They get up really high and they do that. And they will, you know, they get the idea of a bird feeder, a whole new dimension, because they will visit your bird feeder to visit on to eat the birds. I've gotten more emails about people complaining about pygmy owls raiding their bird feeders. They want me to fix it, and I think this is glorious. You're feeding the birds. It's okay. So we have one in our that comes through, and I know it's in our backyard because it's the middle of the day, or especially in the morning, and there's not a bird at the bird feeder. It's deserted, and all I have to do is go out and look around, and there's the pygmy owl just waiting for something to show up. They'll also take rodents. Common goldeneye, more white than dark. They are a diving duck that feeds on underwater insects. They need shallow lakes, trees. They nest in trees like wood ducks. And the female has a black bill. Now, the Barrow's goldeneye is far less common, but notice the apostrophe, not the circle. And that's important because Barrow's has an apostrophe S, right? Well, so does the duck. It has an apostrophe on its face. And the female has a yellow beak. Buffleheads, diving duck, they're cute, 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 cute. Now, they're going to be going out of this breeding plumage this month. They'll be done. They're going to go in their alternative. So they'll start looking like that. Even the males will start looking like the females. Hooded merganser, cute, cute, cute. The smallest little mergansers. And when he sees a female and he's excited, he pops up his crest and shows it off. Otherwise, he looks like that. And she can put hers up too, and she looks like she's having a bad hair day. This is a lesser scaup. They're difficult to tell from a greater scaup. They're smaller. How can you tell? It's the head shape. But they are common here. Big rafts of them out by Clark Fork River. There's the female. This is a misnamed bird. This is a ring-necked duck. You cannot see the ring. It's a very faint red one. They should have called it a ring-billed. Now it looks kind of like the lesser scaup, but notice that little hook there, white. Okay, it's that little jog there. That will help you tell them apart. And then the females also has the ring-billed. Ring neck. Little birds, this is a green-winged teal. And it's named after the secondary feathers. So you put out your feathers. The ones out here are your primaries. The middle ones are your secondaries. And this inside are the tertiaries. So that's a green-winged teal. Blue-winged teal. Looks nothing like the green-winged teal. Teals are little ducks. There's also cinnamon teals. And we have other ones. Widgeons, also called a bald pate, because the males look like they're bald, which isn't a bad thing, I don't think. So, mallards, wood ducks, common. Canvasbacks, people mistake them for shovelers because of the size of the beak. Canvasbacks have red heads, the males do, shovelers have green. In fact, they look like mallards with deformed beaks. The female even has a yellow beak. So shovelers are cool, see those out on Ponderay River. Redheads, pretty birds. Canada geese, all sorts. Trumpeter swan, I'm sorry, tundra swan. Look at the eye. Look at how the head slopes down to the beak. Trumpeters are, the tundra swans are common. In the early spring, late winter, and you're bored, you want to go do something, go out to dense slough. As soon as there's a nice day, the tundra swans show up. And they're the last ones to come back through. They migrate north, they migrate south. The cold weather pushes them out. The nice weather pushes them in. And there'll be lots of them out in dense slough. And they have, you can see the eye. In the lores, there might be some yellow, and that slope of the head down to the beak is a field mark. Trumpeters are rare. You do see them. I've seen them. They generally have that classic S shape when they're the bird that's floating, swimming. Tundras don't. They never have that. This one's not, of course, but notice the eye almost disappears in the lores. And the heads, at the forehead, there's a break. So that's a trumpeter. Mourning dove. My next article will be on mourning doves. I love them. They'll stay around. The cold doesn't bother them. They don't like the rain. So if they have a place to stay, they might stay in your barn if it's open. But they'll be here year-round if the weather cooperates. Eurasian collared doves. There's another chance I got to be citizen scientist. I proved that they're nesting in Bonner County because I was able to take a picture of one without the collar, which is a fledgling. And I sent that off to the Audubon Society. I remember when these guys showed up around 2003, 2004, I saw one down at SWAC, and I heard it call. I go, that's not a mourning dove. What is that? And the only thing I could associate it with was a turtle dove, which is a domestic version. And with a little research, I realized, hey, we have collared doves. Some authorities think they're replacing the niche of the passenger pigeon. Kind of interesting.
Do they compete much with the mourning
No,
doves?
not at all. They don't. There's no overlap whatsoever. They're not an invasive species, but they're not natural, but they're not invasive. And feral pigeons. Olive-sided flycatcher. They look like they're wearing a vest. Notice the yellow belly in the center. A tyrant flycatcher, they sit upright. Flycatchers are tough. Wood pewee, all gray. Used to be called one species, the Pacific flycatcher. Now they divided it. I think it's someone's PhD dissertation or something. Some sort of, I'm serious, DNA, mitochondrial DNA. You can't tell them apart, and their songs are virtually identical. This is the Pacific slope flycatcher. This is the Cordilleran flycatcher. And there's so much confusion. If you report them on eBird, on eBird, if you're in Bonner County, you have to report them as a Cordilleran. If you're in Ponderay County across the state line, you have to report them as Pacific slope. I hope they fix that. But I have one in my yard. Every year we have, it's probably the same one. By the way, the birds you have in your yard were probably born there.
Really? Oh,
They,
wow.
the generations, they don't go flying around. They always go back home, and then they go back home. And then they go back home.
Is it just the picture, or does that bird's beak look thicker?
It's just a picture. Yeah, he's fluffed up, he's cold, this guy's not.
Winter color, you know.
Sage Stevie, I just saw one the other day on the phone line. They can be very pinkish. They'll be on a telephone line. They're a flycatcher. Flycatchers mean they chase bugs, flying insects. That's what they feed off. They don't go on the ground. They chase flying insects. And then the eastern flycatcher is also people call them the butterfly bird because they look like butterflies when they're out there trying to catch a slow-moving flying insect. And they're trying to stay in the air and catch it. And they're hilarious. Noisy, you almost always see them in pairs. Notice the white tip of the tail. That gives them away. Western flycatcher. So the eastern is moving into the west. The western is not moving into the east.
Do you see eastern flycatchers around here?
All the time. By water. Go out to Jewel Lake, where the dock is, you'll see them. Loons, can't miss loons. Common loon, I love them. They're just Minnesota birds, but I love loons. Grebes, western grebe, look at the eye. If you can see the eyeball, that's a Clark's grebe. They're rare, very rare.
You mean the pupils?
You can see the eye. See the whiter of the eye?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So the white
That's
eyes.
amazing. I
You're
just
dangerous.
flicked my bumper. You know, I was par 3 golfing once, and I hit a hole in one. It was the wrong hole, but I hit a hole in one. I have seen them dance. I have seen the western grebes down at this is over there in Hope. I have seen them, they get running and they do this dance and they run, and then they both go in. And then the male will court the female. They'll do this mirroring. He'll do this and she'll do this, he'll do this, he'll do this, and they'll wrap their heads.
Aww.
And then he gives her lake weed. And she takes it, and it's true love. And they are the coolest birds. I love watching the grebes. Grebes also build floating nests. I remember there was a storm coming, and I saw 8 rafts, floating nests of grebes, and the parents were on there, and they didn't know what to do because they were being pushed up against the rocks. So sad.
Well, they
I'm
mate-
going over,
well,
is
they
that
mate
okay?
for
Oh, it's
life.
fine.
Okay,
It's fine.
pardon?
They mate for life, right?
I'm not sure, they might. I don't. They probably do. But even birds that mate for life still go through the courtship every spring. It's just something in the air. Yeah. Pied-billed grebe, favorite year-round here. The most common grebe, easy to find. They're small and they have the pied bill. And eagles love them. They vouch that they're tasty. We have 2 common gulls up here. The ring-billed. You'll see these guys year-round. They'll be in Yoke's parking lot, right? And then the California gull, twice as big, huge. I see them down in Bayview. So you've seen on top of one of the boathouses, see all these gulls, and there's this big guy? That's the California gull. Killdeer, a shorebird that's never by the shore. They're at every city park or along the tracks. They're famous. They show up when there's still snow on the ground. They're famous for their broken wing trick. Anybody ever seen that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you see their nest, the eggs look like rocks. They're amazing. Western sandpiper, bop, 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 bop. I don't know. It's hilarious. They're always bop, bop, bop. I once saw an adult and 3 fledglings just in down. They're all going bop, 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 bop. Even the babies are going bop, bop, bop. These are cool. Western Wilson snipes. They're like hummingbird males. Hummingbirds males don't have a song. They have a dive, right? And they have 2 feathers that come out. And you'll hear this in the evening. And tell me if you've ever heard this. Bear with me as I try to mimic it. You ever heard this sound? Whoa! 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 And it's like all over. It's the Wilson snipe. He's found a female and he's courting her. So he goes way up in the air. He kicks out these, I think they're called rectals, these stiff little feathers, and it comes down. They winnow. It's called winnowing. Woo! It makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It's the Wilson's snipe, and you see them on telephone poles looking at you. Coots, another favorite food. Rafts of them spend the winter here. They raft to try to protect themselves from the eagles, and I remember watching the eagles going around, and the coots were popping up and down on the water. They don't want to be the last guy up, and the eagle will grab one of them. Help me out.
Kingfisher.
Kingfisher, thank you. This is the female. And one of the rare times the female is more colorful than the male. So she has a red band, it's the female, kingfisher. They're here year-round. Great blue heron. There's two races that live here. I think a blue and a light-colored one. I forget the term for it. Great blue heron. I would feed them when I'm ice fishing. They'd come out and they'd watch you while you're ice fishing. You catch a little perch and you toss it to them and they'll eat it up. Sandhill cranes. I've camped where they were, and they're terrible neighbors because at 4 o'clock in the morning they start bellowing and you cannot sleep. But they do fly over here, and you'll see them fly over in the spring, and if it's a cloudy day they'll come quite low and you hear them way up high. So the sandhill crane. Cormorants, double-crested cormorant. You'll see them as well. Have you ever seen them doing that? They in order to outcompete other species, they get negative buoyancy by having wet wings, so they can dive deeper than, say, the mergansers. But the cost is they have to dry out their wings before they can fly. Pelicans, there are pelicans here. Lake Pend Oreille is not good habitat. It's too deep. They need shallow lakes. So you'll see them over there in the slack water where the Clark Fork comes into the Pend Oreille. See them up at MacArthur Lake. Go up to Kootenai Wildlife Refuge, you'll see pelicans. Calliope, smallest bird in North America. The males are already going. The males come up, they don't even get a territory. They find the female, they do what nature does, and when she has a clutch, the males leave. They go. That's probably so they don't compete with the female for limited resources. Black chin.
Have those.
Yeah, and you see them in the light, and that turns purple, and they're very more svelte than the other ones. And 30% of a diet of hummingbirds is bugs, and you'll see them going through gnat clouds. You see them going back and forth. They're grabbing gnats. And the female makes her nest out of spider web. So she'll grab the spider web and then she'll eat the spider too.
Interesting.
Rufus, they're the first guys here. They're here before the flowers are out, but they're eating that. They're drinking from the wells when the sap runs, and they're here only for a short while and they're gone. They're long gone. I've seen those all the way up to Alaska. The female does have a little tiny gorget. We do have swifts. People forget to look for them. When I lived on Kootenai Road, we had some Vox swifts in our chimney. This is a violet green swallow. Violet green, but you notice them because they have saddlebags. See that? That's how you differentiate them from the tree swallows. They have the saddlebag.
What species is that?
Violet green, and they're beautiful. All the swallows are pretty. That's the tree swallow. Also, notice the violet green, you can see the eye. See the eye, the white around the eye? That's missing on the tree swallow. They have a bandit's mask. And these are common bird box breeders around here. They're beautiful. This is a barn swallow, and one of the field marks is it's the only swallow with a swallowtail. None of the other swallows have swallowtails. And it's blues and reds, very similar to the cliff swallow. And also notice the blue rump. Northern rough wing. This is a bank a nester. They burrow in. I go on Pack River floating, you'll see the nests of the northern rough wings. And you identify them, look at how it's unmarked breast, right? So the bank swallows have a band. That's one way to tell them apart. I've seen on the Moy River, I remember seeing a huge, they're communal nesters. Rough wings are not. They nest in solo or mated pairs. So the bank swallows will be communal. And this is a cliff swallow along Long Ridge. They have the same coloration as the barn swallow, but they have a light rump. And they don't have the swallowtail. Also, the barn swallow builds a cup of mud, and the cliff swallow builds a little jug. So if you're in a boat, you go along Long Ridge, you see all these little clay jugs. It's kind of cool. These guys haven't showed up yet. Nighthawks. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they start leaving the hills and going towards the river. And you hear a meep, meep, meep way up high. It's these guys. Look for the white patches. They look like giant swallows, nighthawks. They hunt in the evening. One of my favorite birds. Turkeys, rough grouse. I've seen the male drum. He grabs a hold of an old stump, and then he just goes. Pretty cool.
Are those full hens?
This is a full hen. Spruce grouse. I'm having this way. That's why I brought my notes, because I forget. Franklin's grouse. There we go. There's different races. The one around here is a Franklin's grouse. The Indians call them full hens. And I don't know if you've ever seen these. They'll just walk right up at you. You can walk up to them. They just look at you. You can hit them with a stick. That's what the Indians did. That's how they hunted them. They just came up and whacked them. So then settlers called them fool's hens. But they're beautiful. Valley quail, also called California quail. They are not a native bird, but they do well here. You'll see them running around, little cubbies. Okay, winter resident, we're almost done. I got 4 more birds and we're done. In the winter, we get birds that come down for the winter. You gotta look for them. The common ones are the shrike, the northern shrike, the butcher bird. They're a songbird that acts like a hawk. And you go out on a beautiful day in January, go out Sully Valley somewhere, look on the long telephone lines, in the middle you see a shrike, keeping an eye out for voles. They come down from the Arctic and they spend the winter here.
They're the reason you find like mouse carcasses and like Travis Park alongside the thing to see the mouse carcasses nailed to the tree.
Yeah, they do what's called a larder, but I think they mostly do that during the breeding season, but I don't know, yeah. But they're distinctive. Rough-legged hawk, also very common. Go up Highway 95 and look on the top of telephone poles. What's distinctive about the rough-legged hawk is, besides that white neck, that breast area up there, they don't look like they have a beak. They look deformed. You see this big hawk, and the beak is so diminutive it looks deformed. That's a rough-legged hawk. And that's an adaptation to the Arctic. These are Arctic birds. They have undersized feet. They have feathered legs. Only golden eagles in them have that. All other raptors have bare legs. And they have a very small beak, and that's an adaptation for cold conditions. But they're very common down here. And then lastly, this guy. He looks just like a chipping sparrow. Same size, unstreaked breast, rufous cap, but he has a rufous eyeline. And he has a little spot in the middle of his breast like a song sparrow. That's an American tree sparrow. They don't live in trees, and they spend the summer in Canada. But that's the American tree sparrow. And they'll be here all the way to April. They're all over my backyard. And you gotta look for them because they look like chipping sparrows. But they have a red stripe and they have that dot. All right? Now, I want you to do eBird. And go to www.ebird.org. And you can put in your own data. And I don't know if I can